Spending a week in a mental institution. I was in, I went back to my childhood home that I spent some of my childhood in. And I just had this feeling like traumatized, PSTD. And I'd been serving people all around me, and I couldn't use my words. And I felt like everyone was making fun of me, and I felt like nobody was really loving me. And I felt like everybody just wanted me to work for them and make me feel like a misfit. I felt really ignored. I felt like people in my family didn't want to spend time with me, and that they just wanted me to work for them. And so I had about a week or two of that, feeling alone, feeling like people only wanted to use me for work. So this happened for a few weeks, and then I went back to my childhood home, and then I got blamed for something that I felt like really wasn't my fault, and so I was getting blamed. And it all happened together, and it was just a few weeks of not feeling loved by anybody and feeling like not knowing how to communicate and not knowing how to get the love I needed. And so I just felt empty and depleted, and I felt like all my energy was gone, and everybody was just hurting me around me, and nobody in those 2 weeks of time, I felt like nobody put any love into me. And I just felt like a cactus that I was dried up, because I felt like I was giving and giving and giving and giving. I felt like nobody was giving back. And I felt like I didn't know how to ask for anyone to give back. And so I just lost it. And so I remember I had my 2 kids with me, and they were around, my one son was just still a baby, and then my other son was 2. My one son was about maybe 6 months old, and then my other son was 2. And I felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown. And so I called my mom and I said, I feel like I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. Can you come and get the kids? Come get my kids. And she came and got them. And I prayed to God. I never had a nervous breakdown yet to this time in my life. I never really got mad. And I was around 30 years old. And I had all this pent-up energy of not feeling loved that had been happening my whole entire life. And it was all pent up. And I just felt like it had to be released. I had to get upset for once. I had to let people know how upset I was to not feel loved. I had to let people know how upset I was to feel alone, and how upset I was to not be able to use my words and to not be able to communicate and to feel like a misfit and to feel like I could be abused and I didn't know how to stand up for myself. So I prayed to God. I said, God, can I get mad? Can I let this out? Will you give me permission? Can I just scream and get everything out? And I felt like he didn't stop me, so I felt like it was okay. So my mom came and got the kids, and I started screaming on top of my lungs. And I said, nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. And I just said it, and I got on the phone, and I even tape recorded it. So I had a message of how I felt. And I wanted it on tape. I wanted people to know how unloved I felt and how that was the only thing I could feel at the time. And it was the only words I could get out. And I screamed it, and I screamed it, and I screamed it for hours. I just sat in one spot and screamed on top of my lungs. There were people around me. There were people witnessing. And I screamed it, and I screamed it. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. Until I threw up. Until my nose bled. I screamed it. I got all my upset from every traumatic event that happened to me my whole entire life and all the abuse I ever went through. And I got it all out at once. And I screamed it, nobody loves me, for hours on top of my lungs. And finally I threw up and started bleeding. And finally somehow, I don't know who got me to the insane asylum, but somebody did. I don't know if it was an emergency vehicle or was a family member. I don't know how I got there, but I kind of felt like it might have been an emergency vehicle. And they took me to, pretty sure it was them, an emergency vehicle, because I don't think anybody else would have thought to get me there. So I ended up at this insanity ward, and it was called, I think it was called True North, or Two North. I think it was True North, and it was in Medford, Colorado. They took me to the mental institution, and they had me they had me in the they had me tied down in the cuffs, and where they kind of give you shock treatments, and it was definitely a mental institution. And they had me in there, and I still was mentally ill. And so they had me handcuffed to the bed and all that, and basically, and then I was just so messed up, and then they gave me some nuts or something like that, and that calmed me down and kind of started getting back to normal. And then they were giving me some pills, I think, to calm me down, which hopefully didn't mess me up. And then I remember I was like, after I started to get back to normal, I'm like, when can I get out of here? And they said, you need to stay for 5 days for evaluation. So I spent 5 days in the mental institution in Medford, Oregon. And, well, I finally felt loved. My mom visited me, my dad visited me, my grandma visited me, and they all brought me food. And they brought me healthy food too. So I finally did get that love I really wanted. I finally did get that attention I really needed. I finally did say what I really wanted to say. And people said what I needed them to say. And they said, she has issues. She needs extra help. They said, they spoke for me. And, I had a fun time in that mental institution. I really did. I designed a board game. And everybody played my board game. The name of my board game was Zen Star. And my board game was about acting out characters and acting out personalities. It was an acting game. And I'd like to invent it again and get it to the world. So I had my board game, and it was a very fun game to play, and everybody wanted to play my board game. And there was a girl named Worm. At the mental institution. And the reason her name was Worm is she liked to worm around. And she would roll everywhere. And that's why she was called Worm. And she would act like a worm on the ground. And she'd worm up and worm down. And that's why she was called Worm. And she liked being a worm. And we just accepted her as being a worm, you know? And so this is what it was like at the mental institution. But, you know, they had fun things for us to do. They had a piano for us to play, and they had all kinds of things for us to do. So it wasn't a bad place. It felt really good. It felt like a happy place. It felt like a place where, well, to be different, it was okay to be different. And I loved that I designed a board game, and I wish I could have done something with it. I loved that everyone accepted me there. And after 5 days, they evaluate you to see if you're ready to go home. And after 5 days, I was ready to go home, and they let me out. And after 5 days, Worm was ready to go home too. And she had a husband that loved her. And I remember he was in a wheelchair. And it just had a strong impact on my life. And usually the people they would let out, there was usually people in the outside world that wanted them out and wanted them back. And so we both had a life we wanted to get back to. But I remember my life always was better after the mental institution. I think it's because I had people talking for me and telling people how I felt and telling people that I was different and telling people not to put high pressure on me. And I just felt like I was more understood after I was in the mental institution. I felt like people finally realized that I wasn't feeling loved in my life and that people actually wanted to try to show me more love. And I just felt like it was just a time where I just let out how I really felt and how I felt so alone in the world. And after getting all that out, I felt like it was finally time to get better and to accept people's love and to love people back. So I'm glad I was there.